A wolf found a baby in a car accident. He took the baby into the deep forest, leaving the helpless mother. No one knew what the wolf's purpose was, but when the rescue team witnessed what the wolf did to the baby, they were shocked, speechless. The night sky was thick with clouds. The wind howled, fierce and relentless, cutting through the branches like a warning cry of the coming storm. On the narrow, deserted highway winding through the forest, the headlights of a lone car pierced the gloom, casting fleeting glances at the gnarled trees on either side. Inside the vehicle, Sophia held the wheel with one hand. The soft glow from the dashboard bathed her face in warm light as she spoke into the phone, propped up by the console. "Mom, you won't believe how big Sam's gotten. He'll be so excited to see you both." Her voice cracked with emotion. It had been 3 long years since she'd last set foot in her childhood home. In the back seat, Sam, her 2-year-old son, clutched his beloved coloring book, The Jungle Book. His small, chubby fingers traced the outlines of the vibrant animal figures, eyes wide with excitement. "Look, Mommy!" he squealed, holding up the book as though she could see it through the rear-view mirror. The car's rhythmic hum and the rain that began to patter lightly against the windshield were comforting, almost hypnotic. But comfort was fleeting. A sharp crack pierced the air, a thunderous pop. The steering wheel jerked under Sophia's hands as if possessed, and the tires shrieked against the road. The car swerved wildly, metal groaning under the strain, and Sophia's heart surged into her throat. "Sam! Hold on!" she screamed, the phone clattering to the floor with a hollow thud. Her vision blurred as the car veered off the road and tumbled down the steep embankment, a deadly dance of screeching metal and shattered glass. The world spun. Flashes of green and brown, the brutal snap of branches hitting the windows. Sophia's body was flung against the seatbelt, then against nothing as the world around her dissolved into a painful haze. The last thing she registered was the shrill, terrified wail of Sam before everything went black. When the noise stopped, silence descended like a shroud over the forest. The smoke from the engine spiraled into the crisp, damp air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. The car lay motionless on its side, windows shattered and metal twisted into grotesque shapes. Sam's small voice, once bright with joy, had fallen silent. In the quiet, a new sound emerged, soft, almost imperceptible at first. The rustle of leaves and a low growl broke the eerie calm. A pair of yellow eyes glowed in the shadows, catching the moon's faint light as it peeked through the storm clouds. A wolf, its coat a blend of grey and white, stepped out into the clearing. It was larger than any wolf Sophia had ever imagined, muscles rippling under its thick fur, eyes locked onto the wreckage. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, gasoline, and something else. Fear. The wolf's nostrils flared as it took in the scene, ears twitching as the forest seemed to hold its breath. Sophia stirred weakly, eyes flickering open to catch the beast approaching the car. Panic coursed through her veins, but her limbs refused to move. "No, Sam," she whispered, voice barely more than a breath. The wolf's silhouette loomed over the child, its claws clicking softly against the metal as it reached the car seat. It paused for a moment, gaze shifting to the motionless mother, its expression unreadable. Then, with a swift motion, it clamped its powerful jaws around the seatbelt, shredding it with jagged snaps of its teeth. Sam let out a small cry as the seat lurched, his tiny fists clutching his book tighter. But the wolf's movements were deliberate, almost tender. It grasped the fabric of his shirt and lifted him effortlessly, turning away from the smoldering wreck. Sophia's vision blurred again, this time with tears and helplessness. The last image burned into her mind was of the creature's broad back disappearing into the shadowy forest, Sam's fragile form nestled securely in its grasp. The car creaked ominously as flames began to lick at the shattered windows. The forest exhaled, the storm clouds breaking open, and rain poured down in a relentless cascade, unable to wash away the horror that had just unfolded. The piercing wail of sirens broke through the still night, scattering shadows across the lonely road. Adam Robinson, seasoned rescue officer with more years in the field than he cared to count, felt a familiar jolt of adrenaline as he sped down the narrow path, the roar of the engine drowning out the thundering of his heart. He tightened his grip on the wheel, eyes locked on the distant plume of smoke that signaled disaster. "Dispatch, I'm approaching the scene," Adam spoke into his radio, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "Proceed with caution, Adam. Reports indicate there might be survivors," came the reply, clipped but urgent. The car wreck loomed into view, a grotesque silhouette of twisted metal bathed in the flicker of orange flames. Adam parked and dashed out, his breath puffing white in the chill air. The ground crunched beneath his boots as he hurried to the upturned vehicle, the acrid scent of smoke biting at his nose. A woman lay sprawled a few meters away, limbs at unnatural angles. Adam's pulse quickened. He knelt beside her, careful not to jar her fragile form. Blood trickled from a gash at her temple, pooling beneath matted hair. Her eyelids fluttered, and she let out a strangled groan. "Mom, can you hear me?" Adam asked, leaning closer. Her eyes cracked open, unfocused and hazy. "Anna? My baby? Where is she?" Her voice was barely more than a breath, yet it clung to the frigid air, sharp and desperate. Adam's chest tightened. A baby. He pressed the radio to his lips. "Confirmed? There's a child involved. EMTs prepare for immediate transport. The mother is in critical condition but conscious." The woman's eyes rolled back, and she sank into unconsciousness. Adam waved over the paramedics, who swiftly but gently placed her on a stretcher, their movements methodical yet urgent. Within moments, the ambulance doors slammed shut, the siren wailing as it tore down the road toward the hospital. A cold silence settled as Adam turned back to the wreckage. The twisted heap of metal and scorched fabric told a grim story. Flames had already licked away the paint, leaving behind a skeletal frame. He surveyed the scene, the charred remains of a car seat catching his eye. "Damn it," Adam whispered, dread pooling in his stomach. He approached the car, the heat still radiating fiercely enough to singe the hair on his arms. The seat was mangled, burnt to a misshapen shell, yet there was something strange. No body, no sign of a child. Just empty straps, blackened and frayed. His gaze darted across the ground, searching for clues. That's when he saw them, thin drag marks carved into the frost-covered earth, leading into the forest. His heart thudded, an ember of hope sparking to life. Could she have survived? Adam muttered to himself, eyes tracing the uneven trail. He fought the urge to call out. The woods swallowed sound like a predator. Instead, he swallowed hard, his instincts screaming caution. Every step was measured as he ventured into the trees, the darkness pressing against him. The forest felt ancient, its towering pines casting jagged shadows that quivered in the dim light of his flashlight. The path was narrow and treacherous, roots gnarled and clawing at his boots like the hands of the dead. "Stay calm, Adam. Don't lose the trail." His voice was a tether to reality, steadying his thundering pulse. The marks continued deeper, almost frantic, as if whoever or whatever had made them was in a hurry. Suddenly, a distant rustle snapped him to attention. Adam froze, straining to see past the tangle of branches. He caught a glint, just a fleeting reflection, like eyes watching from the gloom. His hand tightened around his radio, the other dropping to the knife strapped to his belt. Silence reigned once more, thick and impenetrable. The marks led him forward into the unknown. He took another step, his breath shallow, heart poised between hope and fear. Adam's breath hung in the cold air, misty tendrils dispersing into the encroaching night. The prints in the snow were unmistakable, massive, deep, and clearly belonging to a wolf. A shiver ran down his spine, but he pushed it aside, gripping his radio tightly as he called into the rescue station. "We've got tracks. Definitely a wolf. I'm heading in now," Adam said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. Silence crackled back at him before the static burst into life. "Adam, wait for backup. A storm is coming. Radar's lighting up like a Christmas tree," the dispatcher warned. "No time," he replied curtly, already moving deeper into the forest. His gut told him every second was precious. The baby's life depended on him. He clipped the radio to his belt, eyes narrowing as he pushed through the dense underbrush, each step cracking the frost-bitten twigs underfoot. The forest seemed to breathe around him, shifting shadows cast by the rising moon. The wind whispered, its icy fingers biting through his thick jacket. He heard the howl of a wolf echo, long and mournful, weaving through the cold silence. It wasn't far, and it wasn't alone. A chorus of howls followed, chilling and fierce. Adam's heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to keep moving. "Keep it together," he muttered, wiping the sweat from his brow despite the frigid air. Meanwhile, on the far side of the woods, the wolf stood watch over the child. Its amber eyes, reflecting the pale glow of moonlight, never wavered from the fragile bundle nestled beside it. The baby stirred, tiny fists clutching at the air before settling back into a deep, restless sleep. The wolf shifted, curling its body closer, fur brushing softly against the baby's cheek as it shielded her from the creeping frost. The night deepened, the silence punctuated only by the rustle of dry leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. The wolf's ears twitched at the first hint of snow, its keen instincts warning of the danger to come. It huffed softly, almost as if whispering a lullaby, then shifted again, pressing its warm bulk tighter around the infant. Each breath sent little clouds of heat over the child, a protective cocoon against the biting chill. Adam trudged on, his boots leaving imprints that soon disappeared as the wind swept snow across the ground. The chill had seeped into his bones, and with every gust, he felt the sting of fatigue clawing at him. He glanced up, catching a glimpse of the ink-dark sky dotted with stars, now veiled behind heavy clouds. The promise of a storm loomed, pressing him to quicken his pace. An hour later, the first flakes began to fall, dancing erratically on the breath of the wind. Adam stopped, scanning the area, heart sinking as he thought of the baby exposed to this bitter cold. "Damn it," he whispered, fists clenching in frustration. He couldn't help but imagine the baby's tiny face, eyes wide with innocent confusion, surrounded by the relentless snow. Adam's hand hovered near the small hatchet at his side as he pressed forward, the glow of his flashlight casting long, wavering beams over the snow-dappled ground. The light caught on broken branches and disturbed patches where something large had passed. He knelt, eyes narrowing. Fresh. They were close. A rumble in the distance, low and menacing, signaled the storm's approach. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like a wounded beast. Adam knew he had to stop and make camp. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and soon the woods would become a frozen maze. Reluctantly, he found a clearing sheltered by a thick copse of evergreens. He built a fire, its flames sputtering defiantly against the gusts. The heat was a small comfort, but it did little to chase away the gnawing worry. Adam sat with his back to a tree, the crackle of burning wood mingling with the storm's rising howl. "Hang in there, little one," he whispered into the dark. The night dragged on, broken only by the wind's chilling scream and the occasional distant howl of wolves. As sleep tugged at his eyelids, Adam's dreams were haunted by images of a baby's small hand slipping through his fingers, lost in a swirl of snow. The first light of dawn would be his signal, a fragile promise that hope was still within reach. But until then, he remained, a lone figure on the brink, both guardian and hunter, locked in a race against nature's relentless fury. As dawn broke, a thin crimson light cut across the rugged landscape, casting jagged shadows over Adam's determined face. The forest, with its dense canopy and whispering leaves, had always been both a mystery and a memory for him. Each step up the narrow, rocky trail brought flashes of past rescues, missions where fear and hope intertwined. The chill of the early morning nipped at his skin, but Adam pressed on, sending his GPS coordinates back to the base with a quick tap on his radio. The trail he followed wove through thorny thickets and over roots that seemed like nature's attempts to guard its secrets. Paw prints scattered across the dirt, overlapping one another in a chaotic dance. They were fresh, their edges crisp. The terrain turned more treacherous with each passing minute. Sharp inclines and loose stones tested his balance. Adam clenched his jaw, glancing back over his shoulder at the winding path that seemed to stretch infinitely into the shadows. "Time isn't on our side, is it?" he muttered, eyes narrowing. Every delay felt like a small defeat. He adjusted his gear and wiped the sweat from his brow. In his mind, he could almost hear the desperate cries of the child he had yet to find. As Adam moved deeper, signs of life emerged. Long scratches marred the bark of towering oaks, their grooves deep enough to suggest the strength behind them. The air carried a pungent, animalistic scent that prickled the back of his neck. "Looks like I'm not alone," he whispered, fingers brushing the handle of his utility knife. He knew that facing a single wolf would be a gamble, but a pack, he took a steadying breath, would be a death sentence. The silence of the woods was punctuated only by the soft rustle of leaves. He froze, senses on high alert, as a low growl rumbled somewhere ahead. Suddenly the underbrush shifted and a shadow emerged. Adam's heart thudded as a young wolf, its eyes like molten gold, stepped into the clearing. It was smaller than he expected, its fur matted with twigs, but it was not alone. Another shape moved in the distance, larger, more formidable. The wind shifted, carrying their scent closer, rich and earthy. Adam took a cautious step back, fingers hovering over his flare gun. "Easy now," he said, voice low and steady. The wolf's gaze locked onto his, unblinking. The tension crackled like static between them, the air so thick that Adam felt each heartbeat echo in his chest. A sudden rustle snapped their attention sideways. The sound of small, hesitant steps came from the trees. Adam's eyes darted to the source, hope flaring in his chest. For a moment, he thought he saw the outline of a small hand. "Hello?" he called, louder now, straining to keep the tremor out of his voice. The wolf's ears perked up at the name, its posture shifting from aggression to curiosity. The larger wolf, a towering figure now half revealed by the early light, released a sharp bark that seemed more a command than a warning. The smaller wolf slunk back, eyes flitting between Adam and the woods behind it. Adam's breath caught in his throat as a glimmer of understanding passed between him and the wolves. He took a slow step forward, heart pounding as he fought the instinct to flee. Adam's pulse quickened as he moved through the dense underbrush, each step measured, every breath slow and deliberate. Finally, the trees thinned. revealing an old, weather-beaten cabin nestled in a clearing. The moon's pale glow cast ghostly shadows over its splintered walls, and Adam's heart thudded hard as his eyes traced the unmistakable paw prints leading straight to the open doorway. "There it is," he whispered, half to himself, half to the frost-laden air that clouded his breath. Steeling himself, he stepped forward, the brittle crunch of a dry branch beneath his boot betraying him. The sound snapped through the silence. A low growl rolled out from within the cabin, deep and primal. Adam froze, eyes locked on the dark interior as a shape stirred. The moonlight glistened on a pelt of grey-white fur as the wolf lifted its head, eyes luminous and locked on him. But instead of lunging, the creature's gaze shifted downward to the small form tucked against its side, tiny, motionless, and heartbreakingly fragile. Adam's throat tightened. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice barely a breath. He took a cautious step, feeling the weight of the silence bear down on him. The wolf's nostrils flared as it bent its head, sniffing the child with an almost tender urgency. Then, as if making a decision, it slowly backed away, muscles coiled but eyes never leaving Adam's face. For a moment, neither man nor beast moved. The only sound was the brittle wind sighing through the pines. Adam's training screamed at him to be prepared, to expect the worst, but as the wolf settled into the shadows, it showed no signs of aggression, only a strange, wary calm. "Thank you," Adam whispered, though the absurdity of speaking to a wild animal struck him. He knelt, hands trembling, and touched the child's face. Cold seeped from his skin, and his chest was unmoving. A bolt of dread speared through him. He pressed 2 fingers gently to baby's neck. No pulse. No breath. "No, no, no!" Panic bubbled up, clawing at his composure. Adam bent over the child and performed 2 rescue breaths, each exhale sending a prayer into the void. His ear hovered over the baby's face, desperate for the faintest hint of life. Still nothing. With an unsteady hand, he began chest compressions, each push a plea, each count like the ticking of a relentless clock. Behind him, the wolf shifted, a low whine vibrating in its chest. It paced at the cabin's edge, eyes flicking between Adam and the child, as if understanding the stakes. The small room held its breath, silence pressing in like a weight. "Come on, little one, fight!" Adam whispered fiercely, his voice cracking. His fingers continued the rhythmic compressions, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. The seconds stretched into an eternity, broken only by the ragged gasp that burst from the child's lips. His small chest rose shakily, and Adam nearly collapsed from the surge of relief. He was breathing again. Adam's breath came in ragged gasps as he cradled the baby boy against his chest. The little one had just taken his first shuddering breath, and Adam's eyes shimmered with unspilled tears. The boy's small chest rose and fell with tentative life, the soft whisper of air, a fragile victory against the odds. Adam murmured, "You're safe now, little one. You're safe." From the shadowed corner of the cabin, the wolf watched. Its eyes, pools of molten gold, seemed to flicker with something unreadable. Not far off, a low, mournful howl cut through the silence, piercing the air with a feral urgency that made Adam's spine tingle. The wolf's ears perked and it shifted, muscles tensing beneath its thick silver fur. "Stay with me," Adam whispered to the child, whose eyes, wide and glassy, peered up at him as if sensing the precariousness of the moment. The sudden cacophony of howls multiplied, a symphony of predators closing in. The wolf turned sharply, darting out the cabin's open doorway, its body a blur of power and instinct. Adam's pulse quickened. He knew the woods well enough to recognize what those howls signified. A rallying cry, a call to arms, a pack on the hunt. The weight of that realization sank deep into his chest. He clutched the baby tighter, his voice a shaky prayer. Please don't let this be the end. Suddenly, silence descended. The abruptness was suffocating, as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting. Cautiously, Adam took a step toward the door, the cold bite of fear crawling up his neck. He peered out, eyes adjusting to the dim light of the clearing. His breath hitched at the sight that met him. A colossal, grey-brown wolf emerged from the underbrush, eyes burning with ferocity, each step a challenge to the very earth. Its snarl revealed fangs that gleamed like polished ivory, a promise of violence. Adam froze, the baby shifting slightly in his arms and letting out a soft whimper. The wolf's gaze snapped to them, the deep rumble in its throat rising to a growl that reverberated in Adam's bones. Adam's hands trembled, the weight of helplessness heavier than anything he had felt before. The massive wolf advanced, hackles raised, eyes locked on him with a predator's intent. Just as the world seemed poised to shatter, a silver flash cut between them, a barrier of muscle and fur. The wolf with eyes of gold stood firm, a protector against its own kind. The two wolves circled each other, their growls merging into a primal chorus that echoed through the clearing. Adam took the moment to edge back into the safety of the cabin, eyes darting between the sparring giants. Claws scraped against the frozen earth, jaws snapped with bone-crushing force as the grey-brown wolf lunged, only to be met with a fierce counterattack. The silver wolf held its ground, its movements fluid and precise, a dance of survival. Time stretched into painful seconds as Adam watched, powerless but unwilling to tear his gaze away. The clash reached a fever pitch, the grey-brown wolf letting out a yelp as it stumbled backward, blood seeping into its thick fur. With a final hesitant glance at its challenger, the defeated creature slunk into the shadows, a phantom returning to the darkness. The air was heavy with silence once more, broken only by Adam's labored breathing. The silver wolf turned, golden eyes meeting Adam's for an instant, a silent acknowledgement passing between man and beast. Then, with a measured step, the wolf began to move toward the trees, pausing only to look back, as if beckoning. Understanding dawned in Adam's eyes. Clutching the baby close, he followed, feet treading lightly over the trampled ground. The silver wolf led them through the dense forest, navigating unseen paths until they reached a clearing marked by a sliver of dawn's light. Adam exhaled shakily and activated the locator beacon strapped to his pack, the small LED flashing like a beacon of hope. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with gratitude as he looked at the wolf. It stared back, ears flicking as a breeze swept past. Then, with a silent grace, it melted into the woods, leaving Adam with a story that no one would ever fully believe. Adam's team stood at the edge of the dense forest, tension palpable in the crisp morning air. Their radios crackled with static, and their eyes scanned the dark treetops for any sign of movement. 2 hours had passed since Adam's last transmission, and each minute that dragged by felt like an eternity. Faces hardened with worry, and murmured conversations hinted at the worst outcomes. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sharp ping of an incoming message on their shared comms. "It's Adam!" one of them shouted, relief washing over the group. The forest echoed with shouts of joy as seasoned search and rescue members exchanged hurried smiles. A quick scan of the text confirmed what they had hoped for. Adam was on his way back, and he wasn't alone. In the dimly lit hospital room, machines hummed softly, a monotonous reminder of the fragile boundary between life and loss. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, her vision swimming as bright overhead lights pierced the haze of her awakening. A familiar scent reached her first, the sharp, sterile tang of antiseptic. Her muscles ached with a dull, throbbing pain. But a deeper, more gnawing ache pushed her to move. Her heartbeat raced as memories of the accident surged back like waves crashing on a forgotten shore. Panic clawed at her chest. "Where's my son?" Her voice came out as a hoarse whisper, more plea than question. Before the nurse could respond, the door opened. A tall, rugged figure entered the room, cradling a bundle of blankets. Adam's eyes met hers, and for a moment they both stood frozen, held by a silent understanding. "He's here. He's safe," Adam said softly, his voice breaking the silence. With trembling hands, the mother reached out as Adam gently transferred the small, warm bundle into her arms. The moment their skin touched, a sob broke free from her throat, raw and unrestrained. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her son to her chest, his tiny fingers curling instinctively into the fabric of her hospital gown. "You're here, my brave boy. You're safe," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The baby's eyes, round and full of innocent wonder, blinked up at her, as if sensing that this was where he belonged. The room seemed to hold its breath, honoring the reunion as mother and son melted into each other's presence. Outside the room, Adam's broad shoulders sagged in quiet relief. He had faced battles, stared down beasts with eyes that glowed menacingly in the night, but nothing had shaken him more than the thought of losing this child. The memory of the wolf's amber gaze, watchful yet almost human in its depth, lingered at the edge of his mind. A tap on his arm brought him back. It was the grandmother, her hair a soft halo of silver, eyes brimming with unshed tears. Beside her, the grandfather stood, a stoic man who now wore an expression that could only be described as reverence. "Adam, we don't have words," the grandfather said, his voice deep and steady, yet carrying the weight of unspoken gratitude. Adam nodded, words sticking in his throat. He glanced into the room where the mother was cradling her son as though she could shield him from any storm that might come. "It wasn't just me," Adam finally said, a shadow passing over his features. "There's more to this story than we know. The wolf." He paused, the disbelief in his voice almost tangible. "It saved him." The grandmother's eyes widened, and she covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Silence fell between them, but it was not empty. It was filled with wonder, gratitude, and a newfound respect for the wilderness and the mysteries it held. Inside the room, the mother's sobs had turned to soft murmurs of comfort. She kissed her son's forehead, tracing the outline of his tiny, perfect face. The boy cooed, his small hand grasping at her hair, and she laughed through her tears, a sound that spoke of resilience and boundless love. "Thank you, Adam," she said, looking up, her eyes locked with his. In that moment, he saw the storm of emotions, relief, disbelief, and a mother's fierce devotion. And though he had been the one to return the child, Adam knew they owed their greatest debt to the guardian of the woods, who watched from the shadows, unseen yet unforgettable. It had been several months since that fateful day in the forest. The memory of the baby, Sam, cradled by a wolf in the middle of the wilderness, had etched itself into their souls like an enduring scar, one filled with gratitude and awe. The morning sun filtered through the trees, painting the ground with scattered patches of light as Adam drove down the narrow forest path. Beside him, Sophia's fingers traced the edges of the faded map, her eyes bright with anticipation. In the back seat, Sam gurgled and cooed, his little hands batting the air as if he, too, sensed the significance of the journey. "Do you think we'll see it again?" Sophia asked, breaking the silence, her voice tinged with hope. Adam cast a glance at her, a wry smile playing on his lips. "If it wants to be seen," he replied. His voice was steady, but underneath there was a tremor of excitement. He had come to respect the enigmatic creature that had once been the guardian of their son's life. The forest grew denser as they neared the clearing where the cabin stood, a lone sentinel amidst a fortress of trees. The cabin looked as it had before, weathered wood and a roof half slouched, as though carrying the weight of the stories it housed. Stepping out, Adam lifted Sam into his arms, the boy's laughter ringing out like a bell, piercing the quiet forest. "Remember, this is where he was," Sophia whispered, her eyes watering as she reached out to touch the cabin's old, splintered frame. The memories surged back, the storm of fear, the heart-stopping moment of seeing Sam nestled beside the beast, and the quiet realization that the wolf was not their enemy. Then, from the shadows, a shift of movement caught Adam's eye. He turned, muscles tensing as he squinted into the gloom. A figure emerged, not menacing, but cautious, a flash of gold eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight. The wolf stood on the edge of the clearing, its coat brushed with streaks of silver, its gaze locked on them with an unreadable expression. Sophia gasped softly. "It's him," she breathed, clutching Adam's arm. Adam nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle in his chest. He held Sam a little tighter, more in wonder than fear. The wolf's posture was relaxed, and as it watched them, there was an air of recognition, a quiet understanding that crossed the boundaries between man and beast. "It's almost as if he came to check on him," Adam said, his voice thick with emotion. Sam, oblivious to the tension, babbled happily, his little hands reaching out as if to touch the very air between them and the wolf. The animal's ears flicked, responding to the sound, and for a heartbeat, the space between predator and prey was bridged by a fragile, inexplicable connection. Sophia stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the wolf's. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. The words were simple, but they resonated through the clearing, carried on the wind like a prayer of gratitude. The wolf shifted, its eyes still fixed on Sam, before dipping its head slightly. Then, with the same silent grace, it turned and padded back into the forest, vanishing into the sea of leaves. It left behind an emptiness, but also a sense of finality, a silent nod that it too had found peace. As the last rustle of leaves settled, Sophia turned to Adam, a tear slipping down her cheek. It's almost like he was saying goodbye. Adam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a soft smile forming. Or maybe he was just reminding us that even in the wildest places, compassion can thrive. The story of that wolf and the baby it saved became a legend whispered in the local rescue stations, a tale of impossible empathy and the bridge between the human heart and the wild unknown. Villagers told it as their own version of the Jungle Book, not of a boy raised by wolves, but of a child protected by one. And that, my friends, is the incredible story of compassion that transcends the boundaries between humans and the wild. It's not every day we hear about a wolf acting as a guardian rather than a predator, reminding us that even in the most untamed places, kindness can take us by surprise. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect on the beauty and mystery of nature, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something extraordinary that showed the unexpected kindness of animals or nature itself? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice could inspire others and remind us all of the powerful connections we share with the world around us. Thank you for joining me today, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a bit of hope and wonder in their life. Until next time, stay curious and keep sharing those amazing stories. See you soon.